Welcome back to another episode of From Dust to Verdict. I'm your host, James Nevin, a partner at the law firm of Brayton, Purcell, LLP. This podcast is dedicated to the epidemic of accelerated silicosis in artificial stone countertop fabrication workers. In each episode, we explore important topics and issues about this occupational health epidemic caused by uniquely toxic artificial stone slabs, as well as the associated litigation. Today, in episode 13, OSHA, March 19, 2026 Standards Board hearing, WOEMA versus the artificial stone slab manufacturers, we recap the most recent Standards Board hearing. Chairman Aliotto finally let WOEMA present on its own petition, unlike each of the last three meetings where it was primarily the artificial stone slab manufacturers lobbying against it. WOEMA's 600-plus occupational medicine physicians, public health experts, and regulators, and hundreds of published peer-reviewed global medical studies have all reached one conclusion: that crystalline silica artificial stone is uniquely toxic, cannot be fabricated safely by human beings, even with advanced engineering controls required by OSHA, and that is why the epidemic has already affected a majority of California fabrication shops and is growing and spreading to other states. They all state that the only solution is a California ban on this deadly foreign product. The main presenter at this hearing was Dr. Robert Blink from WOEMA. He explained that artificial stone countertops are manufactured with pulverized, ultrafine, and nano-sized crystalline silica flour that during fabrication is released, resulting in spirable dust that inevitably causes engineered stone silicosis, a fatal and incurable disease. Despite California's stricter silica regulations, state and local health investigations show workers continue to be exposed at dangerous levels, with 531 confirmed cases, 29 deaths, and dozens of lung transplants in California alone, and rapidly rising numbers nationwide. Dr. Blink emphasized that no feasible combination of wet methods, ventilation, or personal protective equipment can reduce exposure to an acceptably safe level, short of an impractical, hazmat-level spacesuit protection or robotics. He urged OSHA to prohibit fabrication of artificial stone containing more than 1% crystalline silica, noting that safer substitutes using recycled glass or amorphous silica are already commercially viable, as demonstrated by Australia's nationwide ban.
This is the Western Occupational Environmental Medicine Association presentation. It's going to be given by Dr. Robert Blink, MD, MPH, FACOEM. Doctor, I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but folks are going to you'll have an opportunity to be able to speak on this topic when Dr. Blink is finished with his presentation. But for now, welcome. Good morning to you. Thank you for being here. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Aliotto. Thank you to the board for having us here today. I'm Dr. Robert Blink. I'm an occupational medicine physician. I'm a former president of WOEMA, the petitioner, and also a former member of the OSHA Standards Board. WOEMA is an organization of about 600 physicians in Western 7 states. We earlier submitted a petition to limit the exposure to respirable crystalline silica, which has ultimately led to the adoption of the current much more restrictive standard, for which we are very thankful. However, we're now petitioning to essentially prohibit fabrication of this material because our knowledge about the topic has changed. It's much more dangerous than we thought. We do have about 152 individuals who have now signed to support our petition, as well as 11 organizations, and most of which I've put on this slide. You see it's organizations of nurses, non-governmental organizations, academic organizations, and so forth, who are supportive, and we expect to get more as the days and weeks go on. So a little presentation about terminology, because it can be a bit confusing. Silicon, ON, is the base element that cannot be reduced, and that's present in all these materials. You may have heard of silicon wafers. This is the pure silicon that's used in manufacturing computer chips and the like. That's not what we're talking about today. Silicone is a rubbery compound you may have seen in caulk and things like that. It's not what we're talking about today. Silicate is the name for many kinds of rocks, which is a combination of silicon with different minerals, oxygen, and so forth. That's not what we're talking about today. So silica, silicon dioxide, has two major forms. The amorphous silica, which the most common example is just plain old glass. And then there's a special product called silica gel, those little packets you see in your medicine and food containers to keep it dry. That's a specialized manufactured material. That's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about is crystalline silica. Crystalline silica has, as it sounds, a crystalline structure. It's what quartz is made out of, the mineral, and it's what beach sand is made out of, which is really just pulverized quartz. That is what we're talking about, yes and no. The reason no is that the form that's used in this product is silica flour. It's pulverized so small, it's actually smaller than the content is actually more fine than what you see in powdered sugar. This is what's used to make engineered stone countertops, which is the topic of our concern. So engineered stone is made by taking this silica flour, adding resins and colorants and dyes and so forth, and then compressing it into a slab. Beautiful material. Only problem is that it makes people sick and kills them if they're working with it and generating dust. Fabrication is these dust-producing activities. So that's cutting, grinding, sanding, drilling, polishing. And all these things generate dust. And it generates this RCS, respirable crystalline silica dust, which is the dangerous material. The particles have sort of sharp, pointy edges. The silica gets deep into the lungs, into the alveoli, which is the gas exchange area deep in the lungs, and then migrates behind the alveoli into the tissues. And once it's there, it never leaves. You inhale silica, it's going to stay with you to the rest of your life. You inhale more silica, you get more in your lungs. This causes silicosis. That's the name of the disease. There's no debate about this, scientifically proven. Nobody argues. You breathe silica, too much of it, you will get silicosis. Since the market for this crystalline silica engineered stone slab really exploded about 20 years ago, after a 10-year incubation period, the incidence of silicosis similarly has exploded and is pretty much in lockstep with that approximately 10-year incubation period. Dust is dangerous. Here's a little diagram to refresh everybody's memories of the anatomy. It goes through the windpipe down into these little air sacs. They're kind of a grape cluster. Each one of those little bubbles you see in the circle is about a quarter of the breadth of a human hair. If you can make out those tiny black dots in there, those dots are perhaps 1/100th the size of the alveolus itself. So we're getting down very fine indeed, and some of those particles are really even too small to see in this slide. So we're dealing with extremely tiny material which gets in there, burrows its way into the lungs, and never leaves. Silicosis is not curable. Once you've got it, you're going to have it the rest of your life. Even if you stop exposure, once the process of silicosis begins, you absorb particles, it causes inflammation, the inflammation propagates, it causes scarring, etc. It just keeps on going, even if you stop the exposure. So once you're exposed, you will have silicosis. You can't get rid of it. It keeps getting worse. In severe cases, you need supplemental oxygen just to do anything, walking from one room to another, and eventually to just sit in a chair. The lungs become non-compliant. They become stiff and brittle, and they no longer transmit oxygen well. They no longer transmit carbon dioxide to get rid of it well. And eventually the lungs fail, and without lungs, you don't last very long. It's a fatal disease. It also causes lung cancer. It's roughly double the risk of somebody who's not exposed to silica. So currently we have the new Cal-OSHA regulations, which we're grateful for because it's much better than what we had before. But research has shown, and state agencies have shown, both the State Department of Public Health and also the Los Angeles Department of Public Health and others have gone into workplaces and found that despite the new regulations, workers continue to be exposed to much too high levels of silica. And unfortunately, we believe that even the exposure limit that was put in with the new regulations is too high. How do you keep your exposure down? Well, you do wet work. no dry cutting is allowed. Obviously, that's important. However, the wet material eventually dries and becomes dust again. The personal protective equipment, masks and hoods, unfortunately interferes with the ability to see the work. And this is not a crude product. This is if you've seen somebody's kitchen or bathroom, maybe you have it in your home. This material looks beautiful, and it's a real artistic work. When you get silica mud splattered onto the face piece of a respirator, you really can't see what you're doing, and the workers resist using the material. You just can't do it well. Here's the current, this is as of last week, California Department of Public Health website. You can see that there have been 529 cases in California alone that have been identified. 29 of those individuals have died, 29 deaths. The average age at diagnosis is 46 years old. The average age at death is just 3 years beyond that. Very rapidly progressive disease. They die average at 49 years old. The vast majority of these workers are immigrant, non-English speaking, many of them. And in addition to the deaths, we've got 55 lung transplants have been done so far. And it's easy to think of a lung transplant as being a sort of a cure. It is not. All it does is it prolongs your death by about 5 years. So 55 lung transplants, 38 still waiting to get their lung transplant, which, by the way, costs about $1 million. And so if you add those up, these are people who essentially are doomed. We can give them an additional 5 years if they're lucky, but it doesn't save you forever. The bar graph at the top there, you can see how many cases were diagnosed in each year, and you can see the rapid rise. We're projecting, based on how much has been seen so far in this year, that this year we will see about 291 new cases, which, as you can see, is a continuation of the upward curve. And the line graph below shows that. It's been said by some who've attended the earlier meetings of this board that this is just about 3 counties in California. You can see there where the counties are in California that the State Department of Public Health has discovered. Essentially, if this work is being done and you look for it, you're going to find silicosis. Many, many places. There's also cases that have been discovered in other states. There's an epidemic being worked up now in Utah, Massachusetts. Recent New York Times article just came out in print today with discussing cases in Kentucky and Florida. And this has been discovered here in California, but it's everywhere. Other countries, Spain has undertaken a good effort to find cases and has found several hundred cases in country Spain as well. So why are we coming back asking for more restrictions after we just talked to you fairly in the past couple of years? Because at the time we presented our petition in 2023, there had been 52 cases in California. We now have more than 10 times that many. Further research has been done on what concentrations are of various materials and how much gets breathed in, and it's just way too toxic for even the levels that we thought were sufficient 2 years ago. So we're asking that we prohibit fabrication if anything has more than 1% crystalline silica. But this is only for engineered stone, mind you, not for natural occurring stone, and we'll get to that later. Well, why not just lower the exposure limit further? Say, well, whatever it is, let's just cut it down by a factor of 10 or 100. The problem is that calculations now show that in order to get to an acceptable level of risk, you essentially would have to be protected like this picture is, with a level A hazmat suit. Hazmat, of course, is hazardous material, which is what this is. And so you really need this sort of spacesuit type of getup, which is unworkable. It takes 2 people to get into it. It's extremely hot. You can only wear it for maybe half an hour, and you can't see very well out of it anyway. So what it comes to is humans really can't work this material safely. You need a robot. Well, what's the alternative? Well, we had other things that we were using prior to the introduction of this material, but what happened is interesting because the country of Australia banned this material effective as of January 2025. And since that time, other manufacturers around the world have switched from crystalline silica, which is the dangerous stuff, to amorphous silica, which is basically crushed glass. And it turns out it works perfectly well. The product is virtually indistinguishable, and it's relatively benign. It's not even regulated, except as a nuisance dust. So basically just substitute for crystalline and go to amorphous. And in Australia, what we've been told, and it seems to be correct, is that there's been no significant effects on the sale of the slabs. There's no significant effects on the employment of the individuals doing the fabrication work. Life goes on. So how about enforcement? Can't we just make the shops safer and have them do it better? Well, as I've just gone over, there really is no safe level that can be attained without these very drastic extreme measures like the level A suit. Also, if you have this material out in the world, people are going to fabricate it, and not everybody's going to follow the rules. And we need to protect the most vulnerable workers, which is virtually all of the people who have been affected. So if you get this material out there, it's going to be worked. It's inherently highly toxic. If fabricated, it will cause death and disease. So that's why we're asking to prohibit the working of this material for anything more than 1%. Why so urgently? Well, the true numbers are unknown, but kind of back of the envelope calculations seem to indicate that we get, as people continue to work this, a new worker becomes a patient with silicosis roughly every week. And roughly 1 in 5 of these silicosis patients, workers, will eventually die of the disease. So a new death every 5 weeks. So in the time since we first proposed this in December, we estimate that at least 13 more workers have started on the road, gotten on the death boat to get silicosis, and about 2 of them have already been preordained to die of this disease, just since we proposed this. So you could probably do a whole bunch of studies and try to pin down differences, but right now we know people are being sickened and killed by this, and we ask that it must be done as fast as possible. What about other materials? Well, I think we already talked about this a little, but 10 years prior to the onset of this crazy upward spike in disease is when this material became more commonly used. No such pattern was seen with other materials, natural stone, etc. There seems to be a unique toxicity to the combination of this crystalline silica, very fine powdered flour, with the resins, the dyes, the metals, everything else that's included. We don't know what, but we do know that it's happening. And so this is a uniquely toxic material. There may be problems with other materials. There always have been, but it's nothing as dangerous as this. So our petition is only about engineered stone containing crystalline silica. That's what we're talking about, just that. So WOEMA asks that the board accept and refer our petition to a Cal OSHA advisory committee for further analysis and proposed rulemaking. And we're always available for any additional technical questions, and we'd be happy to work with any stakeholders to try and find ways to save lives in a way that works. Thank you very much.
Doctor, thank you very much. It's a very informative presentation. We really appreciate you and your efforts to address this very serious issue.
I briefly spoke on behalf of our almost 700 fabrication worker clients with silicosis nationwide. I explained that California is facing a widespread artificial stone silicosis epidemic affecting the majority of its stone fabrication shops, with over 530 confirmed patients and strong evidence that the true number of affected shops is several times higher, undermining claims that the problem is limited to a few so-called criminal bad actors. Certification or licensing will not solve the crisis because even fully compliant, sophisticated shops have silicosis, and the foreign slab manufacturers knowingly continue selling a uniquely toxic product that occupational physicians all determine cannot be safely fabricated by human beings, despite the immediate availability of safer recycled glass substitutes. Good morning. I'm James Nevin from Brayton, Purcell, LLP. Unlike ISFA, we actually represent 527 California fabrication workers and about 200 from other states. Notably, Dr. Blink was a little bit behind. As of today, the total count on the CDPH dashboard is 531 patients, and they're from 715 different fabrication shops, but CWPH is behind on their vetting, having confirmed only 292 of the 531 patients' work histories. That means the true number of the fabrication shops with silicosis is about 1,500. That's a vast majority of California fabrication shops, not just a few bad actors that the foreign artificial stone slab manufacturers in Cambria want to just put in jail. ISFA's certification is not going to work because they already offer free certification. And even the sophisticated shops, including block tops, who follow Cal OSHA worker protection, have silicosis. ISFA's licensing will not work because they already know exactly who they're selling to, and they could instantly stop selling to anyone today, but they do not because they're competing with each other over market share. The foreign slab manufacturers in Cambria have direct contracts with the fabrication shops, or they contract with a supplier or contractor who in turn has a contract with the fabrication shops. But they know that the suppliers and contractors don't have their own fabrication and don't have slab yards. That means these huge, heavy slabs must either be picked up at the fabrication slab distribution centers by the fabrication shops, or they deliver them to the fabrication shops. Meaning either way, they know exactly which fabrication shops are fabricating their slabs. They could stop selling them today if they wanted to. WOEMA and your own Standards Board medical staff and every other occupational medicine doctor on the planet is telling you that crystalline silica artificial stone is uniquely toxic so that it cannot be safely fabricated by human being workers. The safe, otherwise identical recycled glass artificial stone product already exists in the market. It's already what they sell in Australia. Nobody lost their jobs. You could keep listening to the foreign slab manufacturers and billionaires from China and Minnesota, or you could listen to the actual occupational medicine doctors and stop this epidemic now, today, by adopting WOEMA's petition. Thank you. Next, Jane Thomason of the California Nurses Association told the Cal OSHA Standards Board that nurses are seeing the devastating, irreversible consequences of engineered stone exposure, and that the science shows existing controls cannot protect workers, making a ban on crystalline silica engineered stone the only fully protective solution.
Hi, Jane Thomason with the California Nurses Association, or CNA. CNA supports WOEMA's petition and urges the Standards Board to do so as well. CNA represents over 100,000 registered nurses in California. Our members as nurses see the devastating impacts on patients when employers fail to provide safe and healthy workplaces. The science, as we just heard, is very clear that manufactured stone is unsafe and that cutting releases so much lethal dust that existing controls and standards aren't enough to protect workers. Silicosis is irreversible. There's no treatment once you're exposed. Our members as nurses are trained to examine patients, not just the illnesses as they present at the hospital or clinic, but the conditions that are causing patients to become sick in the first place. And so it's clear to CNA that the most protective path forward, the path that would ensure workers are protected fully from deadly exposures, would be a ban on engineered stone. Thank you.
Next, Sherry Balofsky, a board-certified occupational medicine physician and WOEMA president-elect, told the Cal OSHA Standards Board that decades of evidence show that PPE, or personal protective equipment, and engineering controls have failed for engineered stone, and that substitution with safer materials already available protects workers while allowing small fabrication businesses to remain viable.
Hi, and I'd like to thank the Standards Boards for taking my comments. My name is Sherry Balofsky, and I'm a board-certified occupational medicine physician. Full disclosure, I'm also president-elect of WOEMA, but I'm also a small business owner myself of Public Safety Medical Surveillance Incorporated. So I wanted to just share 2 points. And the first is, as a teacher of occupational medicine young doctors who are learning about our field, we teach them first about the hierarchy of controls, which kind of looks like an inverted pyramid, right? We have elimination at the top, and all the way at the bottom of the point is PPE. And the reason we teach our residents and our students that PPE is the least effective way to protect workers is because we're humans and we are fallible. Whether we're wearing our PPE correctly, whether it was fit appropriately to our specific faces, or whether or not the correct ventilation is being used, that's of course an engineering control. These are at the lower parts of the pyramid, and we have enough evidence to show that these lower level control measures have failed. That's evident, right? It's time for us to move up to the top of the pyramid and consider substitution, which is, as we just heard from our last speaker, readily available. And lastly, to my being a small business owner as well, I want to say that yes, my heart, of course, is with the safety and health of workers, but then I also do care about the small owners, the small business owners who have small fabrication shops. And I want to represent that they can remain in business and they can be successful by making a substitution to a different product. Thank you very much.
Next, Stephen Knight of WorkSafe told the OSHA Standards Board that manufactured stone is inherently unsafe and cannot be fabricated safely despite regulations or certification. With compliance failures, workers, especially Latino immigrants, are disproportionately harmed. Safer alternatives are already available, and a ban under WOEMA's petition is the only effective solution.
Hi, good morning, members of the board. My name is Stephen Knight, and I'm here on behalf of WorkSafe in strong support of WOEMA's petition and urge this board to vote to ban manufactured stone. The science is not in dispute. Manufactured stone contains silica at concentrations far exceeding any material, any material workers have historically encountered. Fabricating it, wet or dry, eventually results in lethal dust. This is not a failure of worker behavior or employer negligence alone, it's the product. OSHA's own inspections tell us 90% of workplaces are out of compliance. That number doesn't describe an industry trying and falling short. It's just an industry that cannot make this product safe. These soothing reassurances from industry fly in the face of all the sickness and death across our state. The toll is staggering. Dozens of workers are dead. Hundreds more are sick today and may lose their lives in the next 5 years. That burden is falling overwhelmingly on Latino immigrant workers. We cannot allow these workers to be treated as disposable. Industry will tell you that a certification process can manage this crisis, but certification requires trust, and these companies have not earned it. They deny their products unsafe while losing that argument in courtrooms across the country. And rather than accept that accountability, they're going to Congress for complete immunity. They're being held liable because they fail their duty of care, and their answer is not to meet that duty, but to seek immunity. You cannot build a workable safety regime on a foundation of bad faith. There's simply no remedy that will address this problem as rapidly and effectively as adopting the petition. Alternative products are available. Australia has examined the issue and concluded that a complete ban is the only responsible path forward. So we have a roadmap, we have alternatives, and what we need now is the will to act. We urge the board to vote yes on WOEMA's petition. Thank you for your time.
Catton of the California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation urged the board to adopt WOEMA's petition, explaining that overwhelming evidence shows that manufactured stone is too dangerous to work with, the human toll on fabrication workers is severe, and Australia has already demonstrated that a ban on crystalline silica slabs, replacing them with safe, amorphous silica substitutes, can protect workers while still preserving jobs.
Hi, again, I'm Ann Catton from California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation, and we support the WOEMA petition because of the overwhelming evidence that manufactured stone is too dangerous to work with. The toll on fabrication workers is tragic. We need to follow Australia's example and ban this material. And Australia has also found that amorphous silica products can be used instead, so fabrication jobs can be preserved. Thank you.
Eric Berg, the Deputy Chief of Health for OSHA, challenged the foreign slab manufacturer claims that artificial stone somehow magically does not cause silicosis by pointing out that while Cambria claims 0 cases, They lack any medical surveillance program in their facilities, and they fail to use effective diagnostic tools like HRCT scans, making Cranberry's assertions medically and scientifically meaningless.
Thank you, Dr. Blink, for the presentation. Very informative. I had a comment on statements from industry. One was that engineered stone quartz is not the cause of these problems, and also the manufacturer who also fabricates these products claims they have no silicosis cases in the workforce, but they had previously admitted that they have not instituted any silicosis medical surveillance program for their workers. So I find that claim that they don't have any cases disingenuous because they're not going out and testing for the workers. And we know that the x-rays are much less effective. The B reading x-rays are much less effective. It's the CT scan. So I guess I just want your perspective as a physician that specializes in occupational medicine on that. Thank you.
Dr. Blink further noted that blaming workers or relying on masks is fundamentally flawed because artificial stone silica exposure inevitably causes silicosis at epidemic rates, making fabrication inherently unsafe and justifying prohibition, especially since safer substitute materials already exist.
I agree, Eric. So there's no doubt that indeed silica causes silicosis. I mean, I don't quite understand the argument that you're cutting silica, it creates dust, you're breathing it, you get it in the lungs, and that's not the source. It doesn't make sense. So, blaming workers is not an effective means of controlling occupational disease. It's sort of like saying we don't need to put guards on a table saw because if you're careful, you won't cut off your thumb. Well, sorry, it happens. And same thing here with personal protective equipment. The material is so dangerous that we really can't rely on the perfect use of the equipment. The industrial hygienist gentleman who testified from Boston, I appreciate his comments. However, you'll notice that in his comments, he was referring to being able to control the exposures. What he's referring to is existing occupational exposure limits. He's talking about action levels. These are not adequate. So he's able to control it to some wrong standard. And what we're saying is that if you take the relationship between the amount of dust to the amount of disease, even if you use it at the highest level of exposure possible, which actually raises the permissible amount because the ratio stays the same, if you calculate from the highest level for dry cutting and you extrapolate downwards to an acceptable level of disease, what's an acceptable level of disease? We have one manufacturer saying they've had, say, 1,000 workers who've done this job and never had gotten the disease. Number one, how do you know? Just as Eric said, it may not be that if you did CT scans on them, which has not been done, and I'd be very interested to know what happened. 1 in 1,000 is not an acceptable level of occupational disease. There's no substance that is regulated by this board nor by federal OSHA, which we think it's okay for 1 in 1,000 workers to get sick. And here we have levels that are showing that it's more like 300,000 in a million. Okay, so we're getting these much larger numbers, not even close. So that's the reason that we're proposing to actually prohibit the fabrication in the first place. It simply can't be done right.
Dr. Blink, if it's okay, I want you to be able to obviously finish that question, but then I want to go to questions from the board, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You want to wrap that up or no?
Oh, well,
I mean, you don't have to. I'm just suggesting if I don't want to interrupt you.
I appreciate my colleagues having called in and registered their opinions as well as the nurses and so forth, and the safety people. Occupational medicine physicians, we're the ones who diagnose this disease. I know what it's like to tell somebody, a patient in front of me, that they have an incurable, deadly disease. This is horrible. This is happening to hundreds of patients, and 29 have already died, and there's another several dozen in the works. This is not acceptable. While we bicker about this, let's do a thought experiment. Let's say that there was no substitute available. Would it be okay to ban the substance because it's so toxic? Even if we knew that it could not be replaced, you'd have to use wood or something. but there is a substitute available. So that whole thought experiment leads you to say, why not just substitute?
Deputy Chief of Health Eric Berg further explained that the current federal OSHA 2016 PEL for silica is fundamentally flawed because it measures mass rather than surface area or particle count, making it largely meaningless for assessing the nano-sized, exceptionally high surface area of uniquely toxic artificial stone exposures.
Just quickly on the PEL, we were talking about nanoparticles, and it's a percentage of the exposures. The PEL is measured by the amount of the mass in a unit volume of air. For nanoparticles, which are the most toxic, that is almost useless or meaningless because they have so little mass. They contribute almost none to the total mass that you're measuring. They use mass because it's the easiest to measure, but it's not a measurement of toxicity. The weight of the material has nothing to do with it destroying your lungs. It's the surface area, and we're not measuring that. To really having a PEL that was effective, you need a particle count, which could be done, or you'd need surface area determination, but that's not what the PEL is based on. So unfortunately, the PEL, as it's set now on the action level, are not helpful for that portion of the exposures that are nanoparticles.
Dr. Blink told Chairman Aliota that WOEMA is not asking that the federal OSHA 2016 PL be revised at this time because it is largely irrelevant for artificial stone because artificial stone fabrication workers are getting silicosis at levels below the PEL, making prohibition of crystalline silica artificial stone the necessary response, while any broader PEL reevaluation for other materials, such as natural stone, would be a separate issue not relevant to this epidemic.
Well, our petition is what it is, and we're requesting that fabricating material greater than 1% crystalline silica be prohibited. And the reason is, as I've stated, that while one might study it, people are getting sick and dying. And so it's really pretty straightforward as to why. As to whether I think that a PEL should be revisited. For this material, I think it's somewhat irrelevant because it should be prohibited. For other crystalline silica, we don't know. Again, there seems to be, I believe that it is true, that this unique combination of crystalline silica with the other materials in the slabs is what causes this huge toxicity. So might it be revisited? I think that a project to put together or revisit might be worthwhile, but it's a separate issue.
Dr. Blink explained to board member Dave Harrison that even full-face powered air purifying respirators are not sufficient to control artificial stone silica exposures because achieving an acceptable risk would require a protection factor on the order of 1,000, essentially a full enclosed level A hazmat spacesuit, which is impractical for human being fabrication workers. Dr. Blink also explained to board member Harrison that the engineered stone releases nano-sized scale crystalline silica particles as small as 10 nanometers that behave differently from larger dust, can penetrate cell membranes, and are extremely difficult to filter or control with conventional respiratory protection.
Also, you talked about the level A protection, the spacesuit. Is it your belief that a powered air purifying respirator, full face protection is not sufficient in this environment, that level A is the only thing fully contained?
Some calculations, again, the problem is that you would need extensive research to actually nail down what is an OEL, what's the protection factor needed. But the back of the envelope calculations show that if you use this highest level of exposure and compare it to the incidence of disease, then in order to get down what is often considered an acceptable range of risk, which is about 1 in a million, you would need to have at least a 1,000 protection factor. That's a spacesuit.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my last question, through several speakers over a period of time, talking about the actual particulate matter with this engineered stone, the silica, the crystalline silica, and this product, and that's the size of the particulate matter. And I haven't seen anything bring forward the actual size compared to a quartzite product versus the engineered stone product. And I think there was a presentation in the past that showed the shape of the particulate matter comparative, and how it's a little more catastrophic to the lungs. But is there any studies about the actual size of the particulate matter?
Yeah, this particle size that I've seen ranges down to about 10 nanometers. So this is considered a nano product. I haven't seen an actual size distribution. That number has been mentioned in some of the research. And so whenever you get below 100 nanometers for particle size, it's usually considered nano. So nano behaves differently than other materials. It can pass right through cell walls or cell membranes. It can cover the body in many different ways. But that is also why it is very difficult to even exclude through most respirators.
Okay, thank you.
We just heard all of the doctors and scientists, including Cal OSHA's Deputy Chief of Health, Eric Berg, explain, as they have in several other hearings, that hundreds of published peer-reviewed studies demonstrate without any doubt that crystalline silica artificial stone is uniquely toxic due to not just high silica content, but also its nano size, high surface area from the pulverized silica flour, and toxic metals and resins and additives, such that human beings can only safely fabricate it wearing a level A hazmat suit. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence, Standards Board Chairman Alioto chooses to ignore the evidence and erroneously asserts that there's a meaningful scientific debate. To be clear, the only voices of debate are from the domestic and foreign slab manufacturer lobbyists. And Dr. Blink calmly responds to Alioto's slab manufacturer advocacy by explaining that the proposed ban is limited to crystalline silica artificial stone because the explosive rise in silicosis is specifically and directly linked to artificial stone, whereas there is no evidence of an epidemic in countertop fabrication workers caused by natural stone slab fabrication.
There's been a lot of talk too about the how much, I've been asking this question: can this be produced? Can it be fabricated safely? I know there's a question. Some folks are saying yes, some folks are saying no. Some folks are making the statements that there is no question that it cannot be, that it is inherent in the product itself. I know that's the position you've taken. I've read some things, and some of the chemists that I've spoken to, specifically those out of Turin, Italy, you and I have spoken about them, have said that they simply have not come to that conclusion yet. It's very clear that the increased incidence in the use and fabrication of engineered stone is coinciding almost directly with the increase in silicosis cases. I don't think anybody's going to deny that. But the question really is that a result of more silica being in the air as a result of more engineered stone being cut, or is it something that's very unique to that product? The science that I've read seems to suggest that because silica is a known carcinogen, we need to be able to decrease the amount of silica, period, overall. So I keep asking this question, but why doesn't your ban include these very high silica concentration in natural stones like quartzite? This is something that I've had a hard time understanding. If it's as dangerous, or if it is dangerous to be inhaling, why doesn't it include that?
I think a simple answer is that the horrible increase we've seen in silicosis is directly related to the increase in cutting, polishing, grinding engineered stone. We don't have any evidence that I'm aware of that there's been a direct relationship between cutting quartzite, for instance, and the incidence of silicosis. Clearly, if you're creating silica dust in the air, there's a risk. Yeah. But we're responding to this very specific question, which is what to do about silicosis that comes from fabricating engineered stone. As I said, other materials, it's a topic for another day.
Rebecca Schultz, in-house counsel for Minnesota artificial stone manufacturer Cambria, asserted that a ban on engineered stone would be ineffective and not unnecessary because she claims the epidemic is the fault of the workers and shop owners for not complying with Cal OSHA rules. She, of course, utterly ignores the data that a majority of California fabrication shops experience silicosis in their workers, not just a few bad actors that she says need to be arrested for not complying.
Hi again, my name is Rebecca Schultz, and I serve as Cambria's Chief Legal Counsel. I'm here again to express Cambria's ongoing commitment to worker safety. The ban proposed by WOEMA will not effectively address the cluster of silicosis cases in Southern California. It will not stop the unsafe shops from operating and endangering their workers. In fact, a ban will add more layers of regulatory and compliance complexity and may provide a dangerous false sense of security to workers who are already not complying with OSHA's rules. There are certain elements of Dr. Blink's presentation that I believe we have alignment on. First, silicosis is a very serious occupational disease, and the way to prevent silicosis is to prevent overexposure to RCS. I believe that we also agree that workers can be overexposed to RCS when fabricating a wide variety of silica-containing products if OSHA's regulations are not followed. We obviously disagree as to whether RCS can be controlled in fab shops and whether compliance would require spacesuits. At Cambria operated and owned fab shops, we use air monitoring to ensure exposures to RCS are at or below the action level. As reported in the New York Times, Cambria has cut 650,000 quart slabs without a single reported case of silicosis. There are no spacesuits, I assure you. There are real human workers, hundreds of them working with us for over 20 years. We know compliant stone fabrication is happening in good shops. It's possible, it's feasible, it's happening because we do it. And others do too, such as the workers represented by Judy Yee and Nate Kalinsky and NSI and IFSA. And there's evidence in the literature too, as well as Cal OSHA's own findings from recent inspections, that compliance is possible. The narrative that complying with the law is just too hard, it's just not true. It's a poor excuse for endangering workers. We also disagree that stone fabrication, silicosis, and other diseases can be attributable to one subset of silica-containing products. For this reason, we take issue with the very nomenclature of engineered stone silicosis in Dr. Blink's presentation and the CDPA dashboard. What Dr. Blink said about silica flour in our product is simply false, and we invite him and anyone else to our factory to see how our slabs are really created. Our stone slabs are not RCS. They do not contain RCS, and no RCS is emitted from the slabs. RCS is generated when stone fabrication processes are used without compliance and with Cal OSHA's regulations and requirements. Thank you very much for your time.
David McIntosh presented himself as a certified industrial hygienist. He told Cal OSHA that silicosis among stone fabricators is a serious but preventable occupational disease that he believes can be effectively controlled through tailored engineering, wet methods, ventilation, respiratory protection, training, and enforcement. Mr. McIntosh failed to tell the board that he works for the foreign slab manufacturers and distributors, defending them in civil lawsuits brought by countertop fabrication workers dying from fatal artificial stone silicosis.
Good morning. Thank you for putting me on the agenda. I am David McIntosh, Chief Science Officer, Environmental Health and Engineering Incorporated, which is a Boston-based technical consulting firm. I'm also adjunct associate professor at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, where I've had that position for about 15 years. I'm a board certified industrial hygienist and a board certified toxicologist. In addition, I specialize in the evaluation and management of environmental and occupational health risks. Silicosis among stone bench fabricators is an extremely serious occupational health issue, as has been well outlined here today. Silicosis and related injuries among benchtop fabricators are preventable. Prevention lies in controlling fabricators' exposure to crystalline silica. Industrial hygienists and engineers know how to do this. I know this from direct experience working with employers and employees to control exposure to toxicants in a variety of industries, including crystalline silica in ceramic tile cutting and installation, lead in primary and secondary smelting, carcinogens in hospitals and sterilization businesses, and viruses and other biohazards in research and pharma facilities. I've studied the outbreak of silicosis in California, and I've developed views on industrial hygiene aspects of the issue. I want to be clear, I don't have an opinion on a ban or not a ban. That's not my area, but I do have views on the IH aspects. And it's my opinion that exposures can be controlled effectively in this industry through best practice engineering controls that are importantly tailored to the fabricator organizations with different levels of what I would call capitalization, and accompanied by respiratory protection equipment worn by fabricators during high exposure job tasks, which may be all fabrication and installation tasks, combined with effective education of employers and employees alike, and effective enforcement. The research that's out there in the scientific literature today from NIOSH and other investigators demonstrates that these exposure control techniques can successfully reduce RCS exposures in this industry. Water is essential. I can't say that enough. It's great for capturing dust, and it appears to attenuate the potency of crystalline silica too. Local and general exhaust ventilation is also key. These are basics in industrial hygiene. They just need to be applied in this industry. And then, of course, the last comment I want to make is that controlling exposures to dust of RCS dust in these workplaces will also contribute to controlling exposures to other constituents, at least aerosol constituents, generated during the fabrication, right? So it's not only would it help solve this problem, but it will help avoid problems we can't even foresee right now that arise in the future. Thank you.
Lori Weber from ISFA once again falsely claimed to be representing the fabrication community, when in fact she represents the crystalline silica foreign slab manufacturers and distributors. And once again, she blames the dying fabrication workers for the epidemic.
And I also want to acknowledge the medical community in WOEMA and just thank you for the work that you're doing to bring to light what we know has taken place is where, business owners are not protecting their workers, which is their job to do. And we know that this product that we're talking about, again, I'm not here to represent a product. I'm here to speak on behalf of our countertop and surface fabrication community. We know that there's high levels of silica in this product. I think we've always known that. That's what I've been told. I think that we also know that there are certain protections and certain ways that you have to fabricate it to protect you, and that dust is dust and it's bad for you. As we continue to push forward at ISFA to produce a licensing standard in what would be record time, we still are on target to have that available for stakeholder industry input on March 31st. And we continue to say that we don't believe that the ban is the answer. I would also like to note that I'm a history person and I like to look at history. And so I go back to looking at this Hawks Nest tunnel disaster that was natural stone. And you look at the combination of high silica exposure, production urgency, limited oversight, immigrant workers to meet a demand. A lot of people died because of that. And I'm not saying that that's okay. I want to acknowledge the people that are sick as well. It is not okay. With that, I don't know what else to say except I would be more than welcome. I would please invite me to the table to have conversations with WOEMA about how we protect workers. Love it. Thank you.
In response, Megan Ortiz of IDIPSCA responds that Cambria and ISFA blaming the workers is offensive and ignores the reality of a nationwide undercounted silicosis epidemic harming immigrant workers, noting that licensing and certification has already failed and that Australia has banned it, raising the core question of why Cal-OSHA would continue to allow such a uniquely dangerous product.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, board chair, and all of the members of the board and all who are here today to really talk about this important issue. It's really troubling and it feels sort of like gaslighting to hear the industry tell an organization like mine. My name is Megan Ortiz and I'm the executive director of IDIPSCA. Last year, we visited hundreds of shops and talked to hundreds of workers working in the engineered stone industry. And it feels like gaslighting to hear that silicosis is not the epidemic that it is. It's very troubling to hear comments made by industry today that it's because the workers just won't use the equipment, that silicosis is an issue. Licensing has been tried before in other countries. There is no difference between lungs in Australia and lungs in the United States. And I say the United States, not just California, because this is not just a California issue, and this certainly is not just a Southern California issue. We also have to understand and recognize and be honest and face the reality that what we have is also an undercount because of who the workforce is who is doing this work. An immigrant workforce that is especially being targeted right now. In one of the epicenters, yes, the San Fernando Valley, today, just this morning, we were following reports of ICE. So I think we also need to think about that when we hear also the questions of like, why are not more workers coming forward and coming to these meetings? The reality is that Australia saw that licensing does not work, and so they moved to a ban. Workers told us last year as we shared the uniquely dangerous information about how this material is uniquely dangerous. They asked us, if everyone knew this product was so dangerous, why were we still allowed to work with it? That's the question I ask all of you today. We support WOEMA's petition.
Of concern, for some reason, Chairman Alioto of the OSHA Standards Board, who's supposed to be focused on the safety of California workers and California companies, seems to care more about the billion-dollar profits of slab manufacturers in China, India, and Minnesota. Ask yourself why.
I did not necessarily hear anybody from manufacturing blaming the workers for this. And to the extent that was understood, I can assure you, at least from my perspective, that I would never blame a worker for this type of for this type of lack of control or lack of worker safety. I don't hear that. I hear people really universally being very, very concerned about this. I think that the folks who are in the industry see that this disease and the response to it is an existential threat to their own industry, and I think that they are in a position where they are really forced to do something about that and forced to work with folks like you and other epidemiologists and industrial hygienists to really get an understanding of how this can be controlled.
Next, Ted Sherritt of Flowform Countertops and Blocktops, which are multi-million-dollar sophisticated fabrication companies, said that he opposes a ban on artificial stone because he believes that the sophisticated fabrication shops like his, who are the few fabrication members of ISFA and NSI, comply with OSHA rules and has done the chest x-ray B reads to determine that his workers do not have silicosis. He is intentionally using the wrong test. Chest x-rays miss silicosis most of the time. A high-resolution CT is required.
Ted, I own Flowform Countertops, which owns Blocktops Countertops here in California as well. A couple of things. There's no dispute. Silicosis and all of the issues around silicosis are true. The medical community's done a great job of identifying that. It is a problem that we need to address. I just have some issues with the solution, the banning of a product. There's lots of compliant shops. Like there's 100% certainty that you will catch silicosis working in a non-compliant shop. I'm pretty sure of that because the dust is terrible. It's bad. All of those things. We have to control the dust in our shops. And me as a shop owner, that's our job to make sure our workers are safe, right? They come to work every day. I sign their paycheck. That's my job. That they have workers' compensation, that they're protected, there's safety policies, there's procedures, there's all of this stuff in there to minimize the dust that's occurring in our facility, not just with engineered stone, with natural stone, with granite, with quartzite, has more quartz in it. Again, a different type of quartz, but nonetheless, dust is bad. All types of dust. We have to control it at the source. So we need to do that. And there are, in our opinion, we're doing it properly. So I take a little bit of offense to that we must protect the most vulnerable people, and that's virtually everybody that works in this industry. And I would disagree with that. We've medically tested over 300 people that work in our shop. Some have been with us for 25 years. We've done the B read as requested by Dr. Bob and the spirometry and have found no anomalies. So in our opinion, and we test our air regularly, below the PAL, below the action. That's what we strive to all the time consistently. So we believe that we're running compliant shops and nobody's getting sick in our shops. Yet we're not going to be able to continue. There's going to be rules that are going to change that are going to impact our business. And the reason quartz is so successful today, in our opinion, it's the best countertop product out there today. That's why it's taken off. So there's reasons for it. So, and I guess we talk about silicosis being incurable. So was cancer 50 years ago. So what developments are we doing in the medical community to try to find a cure? And there's some guys doing some barometric chamber work that are having success reversing. Like there's a whole bunch of things going on from the people that we know in our industry that are impacted by this terrible disease. And it is a terrible disease. But I do believe that our shops, compliance shops, aren't the cause of all the silicosis. Thank you.
Moreover, at Brayton Purcell LLP, we already represent artificial stone fabrication workers with artificial stone silicosis from 31 ISFA or NSI member shops, including from Sherritt's own block tops, with more coming to us each day. These are the most sophisticated, trained, licensed, certified, OSHA compliant shops in the country, and yet they too have silicosis. Because as the doctors and scientists keep saying, none of that prevents silicosis from this uniquely toxic crystalline silica artificial stone. Finally, fully adopting the artificial stone slab manufacturer lobbyist position that a few bad actor criminals, dry cutters, just need to be arrested to stop this epidemic, Chairman Alioto boasted about his ill-conceived letter to various California county district attorneys.
I do also want to give a quick update on the letter that we wrote. Y'all heard that we wrote a letter to the district attorneys. I think we posted it on the website, if I'm not mistaken. It was signed by everybody, approved by the entire board. And we have had some really excellent responses from that so far. So we have had communications with the County of Los Angeles, County of Orange, County of San Diego, all of whom have been very, very supportive of the efforts to increase enforcement in this area. I also want to point out that Dan Lucido, who is the Chief Counsel of Cal OSHA, has been doing an absolutely outstanding job in this regard. She's been in direct contact with the enforcement arms of the labor and employment work safety folks who are with the district attorney's office, and is really, really making a lot of strides. Those three counties, to your point, yes, those are the counties with the most number. There's 85% of all cases come out of those three counties, and so that's going to be a really good place to start as far as enforcement goes. You are probably right that it's simply underreported everywhere else, but since that's where it is right now, I think that's a good place to focus our energy. You may have also seen that there was at least one comment from a district attorney who thought maybe the misdemeanor cases would not be a good way to go about addressing this. And I just want to be clear. First of all, number one, I am really looking forward to working with all of these district attorneys. We remain open to continually helping and assisting in any possible way, taking advantage of their leadership in criminal law and in our expertise, or the Cal OSHA's expertise in this particular area, to really kind of work together toward this. I just want to say, though, that the misdemeanor cases, and this is really kind of a large point of the letter that we had written, which is that the misdemeanor cases are really important here because it's not about whether or not these folks serve time or whether or not they get diverted or if they get sentenced to diversion. It's not really about that. It's about bringing these folks some accountability, having these folks come before a magistrate judge or a court in order to be arraigned on these violations. I think is really going to help make people think twice about going back to their shop and dry cutting. So I just really want to emphasize, I do hope it was our effort to persuade to folks why it's really important to bring those types of cases. And like I said, we remain open and very, very dedicated to ensuring a partnership with any district attorney who's willing to continue those enforcement efforts.
Chairman Alioto's letter, which echoes the position of the foreign slab manufacturer lobbyist and Cambria, is not just inhumane, it's dead wrong. First, no shops are dry cutting, which is the act that he is encouraging arrest for. Even the most unsophisticated shops all have wet saws. They all wet cut. This is setting up a straw man and creating a solution in search of a problem. Second, while no shops are dry cutting, some shops are dry polishing and dry grinding, which is still allowed under the federal OSHA standard, but is prohibited by the 2023 Cal OSHA emergency standard. because the equipment for wet polishing and grinding is very expensive. Third, these shops must dry laminate because in order to compete with each other over market share, the foreign slab manufacturers and Cambria usually only sell thin 2-centimeter slabs instead of the thicker 3-centimeter slabs. These 2-centimeter slabs require dry lamination. Fourth, these are not some fat cats sitting in their mansion counting their profits. These less sophisticated shop owners are the hardworking poor. They work right alongside their workers. These owners, too, have fatal silicosis. Fifth, there is not some shadow industry of unknown criminal fabrication shops. The foreign slab manufacturers from ISFA and Cambria know exactly which fabrication shops are fabricating their slabs. There are only 3 ways that a slab gets from the slab manufacturers and distributors to a fabrication shop. First, they have a direct contract with the shop, and they have a paperwork trail showing either their delivery to the shop or the shop picking up the slab from their distribution facility. Second, they have a direct contract with the supplier or contractor that they know does not have its own fabrication facility or slab yard to store these large, heavy slabs that require cranes and specialized trucks to move. And so they skip the supplier or contractor and deliver the slab directly to the fabrication shop. Or, third, the contractor or supplier gives the fabrication shop a pickup slip authorizing them to go to the slab manufacturer or distributor and pick it up. Under all 3 circumstances, the foreign slab manufacturers and distributors and Cambria know exactly which fabrication shops are getting their slabs. Their salesmen and delivery drivers are in these shops every day. If it is supposedly the fault of these criminal fabrication shop owners, there's an easy solution. Stop selling your slabs to them. You know exactly who they are. You don't need Cal OSHA to lock up your customers in jail. Just stop selling them your poison. Lastly, all the occupational medicine doctors and scientists keep saying that Cal OSHA compliance does not work because artificial stone is uniquely toxic. That is why the CDPH has tracked silicosis in a majority of fabrication shops, not just a few rogue shops. We see it at Blocktops, the self-professed leader in safe fabrication. We see it in already 30 other ISFA and NSI member shops. While ISFA, the foreign slab manufacturers, and Cambria keep manufacturing a debate and ignoring the collective voice of the global health authorities, the death clock keeps ticking. How many California workers have to get fatal disease before they will ban deadly crystalline silica artificial stone and replace it with the safe recycled glass stone that everyone except Cambria already makes and sells? Are the profits of billionaires in China, India, and Minnesota really that important to the Cal OSHA Standards Board? As of today, 531 California workers have fatal disease. Will they finally act at 600, 700, 1,000? How many workers is it okay to kill before Cal OSHA does the right thing? The next Standards Board hearing is April 16th. I guess we'll find out then. Thank you for tuning into this episode of From Dust to Verdict. I'm your host, James Nevin, from the law firm of Brayton, Purcell, LLP. Remember to share, like, and subscribe. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we will continue our discussions of the silicosis epidemic caused by uniquely toxic crystalline silica artificial stone, as well as the associated regulation and litigation. Para todos los que hablan español, les recomiendo que escuchen la versión en español de este podcast, presentado por mi buen amigo, Charlie Velasco Ariza.
This podcast contains subjective commentary and opinion-free speech intended to provoke thought and discussion. Investigative commentary intended to shed light on matters of public interest to inform the audience and encourage civic engagement, accountability, and transparency. Findings that are a result of diligent research, fact-checking, and analysis of publicly available material, including news reports, public records, interviews, personal research, experiences, published peer-reviewed medical and scientific literature, published governmental health authority regulations and findings, and other accessible sources. Any conclusions drawn reflect the creator's interpretation of that information and are presented in good faith, and are not intended to malign, defame, or harm the reputation of any individual, group, company, or entity, but rather are intended to be allegations acknowledged to be disputed by artificial stone slab manufacturers and suppliers. The speech herein is protected under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Litigation privilege, CA-CC 47B. Fair reporting privilege, CA-CC 47D1. Anti-SLAPP, CCP 425.16. And fair use doctrine, Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. This podcast and all content herein are exclusive property of Brayton Purcell, LLP, and are protected under applicable copyright and trademark laws. Unauthorized use, reproduction, distribution, or exploitation of this content in whole or in part without express written permission is strictly prohibited. All rights reserved.